Hello, everyone. My name is Kaylee, and my mentor is Lisa Locascio, and I will be reading a piece called Copycat. I want orange juice, she said. I want orange juice too, he said. Actually, I want water, she said. Me too, he countered, a slight grin appearing on his face. Allie moaned in frustration. Why was he copying her all of the time? It was really annoying. Mrs. Duncan always insisted that copying someone was the biggest form of flattery anyone could possibly get. Well, she wasn't flattered, not in the least. Besides anything else, James's smile was getting even wider, and that really irritated Allie. Copycat, she hissed at her friend James, who was sitting across the table from her next to his little sister Morgan. He said nothing and just kept smiling at her. Mrs. Duncan, his mother, chuckled to herself from over at the stove, where she was scooping up ravioli from a pot into 3 plates. Allie's mother sat in a chair to the left of Allie, holding a little baby boy. Allie smiled at her little brother. He was definitely the cutest baby brother in the entire world. A sharp jab in the arm brought Allie back to the table she was sitting at and away from her thoughts. Psst, James hissed at her. What? She growled. For God's sake, Allie, be quiet. Your brother is trying to sleep, her mother said in an exasperated voice. Who could blame her? Allie's little brother had been crying a lot lately, and so Mrs. Howard had been staying up late every night that week trying to get him to calm down and go to sleep. He was also talking now, albeit you couldn't always decipher what it was that he was trying to say. Regardless, he certainly talked a lot for a 2-year-old. After dinner, Allie, James, and James's little sister Morgan went upstairs to play a game. The 3 treated their games almost like ceremonies, to be performed in a certain order. The first game was an old favorite. All 3 lay down on the floor, pretending that a giant had caught them and was trying to cook them like strips of bacon. Quick, James bellowed. Let's get out of here before he comes back. Shh, you're supposed to whisper, dum-dum, Allie scolded. Sorry, James whispered back. Allie shook her head, and they all lay still as they pretended that the giant had come back to check on them. They seem all right, James said in his best imitation of how a giant would speak. They pretended that the giant had walked away to check on something. Then they all stood up and attempted to scurry away like mice. Then they all exclaimed, "Oh no!" and went back into the frying pan, pretending that the giant had caught them. The second time they tried to get away, they were more successful. This time they managed to get to the beanstalk, but then the giant snatched them up again. The third time they finally got away. What should we play next? Morgan asked. Well, I have to do homework, actually, James announced in a proud voice. Neither of the other 2 had homework yet. It seemed like a very grown-up thing to have, so James liked to parade the fact that he was the only one old enough. He was 7 years old. He went downstairs to do his homework, smiling and feeling important. After about 10 minutes, James became really annoyed by all the giggling that he could hear from upstairs. A feeling of jealousy came over him. After 15 more minutes, James was nearly finished with his homework when Allie and Morgan came downstairs to ask if James was done. James made no signs one way or the other, and instead concentrated on his worksheet. Allie came and sat down next to him and tried to imitate James's studious expression, but was unable to keep a straight face. Mrs. Duncan watched them from the kitchen counter. She was holding a cup of coffee in one hand, and she smiled at Allie and James. Allie, do you want a drink? She asked suddenly. Yes, please, Allie replied. Me too, please, said James. Allie rolled her eyes. What juice do you want, Allie? Mrs. Duncan asked. Apple juice, please. Me too. Why do you keep copying me? I'm not copying you. I really want apple juice. You are so annoying. Allie folded her arms across her chest and frowned. One day she would be able to look back on this memory and laugh. She might even write about it someday. But today was not that day. Today it was just plain irritating. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Cornelia Wheeler, and my mentor's name is Sarah Gorbach, and I will be reading an excerpt from my piece, One True Love. Megan stared at the ceiling, smiling wide, listening to 3 words that would change her life forever. She heard the words, "I love you," from the other line. "I love you too," she replied, knowing that all she needed for the rest of her life was to be with Sean. 2 years later, it was her birthday, and she wanted to spend it with her boyfriend, Ryan. They had been dating since the summer after her breakup with Sean. He was going to spend a day taking her shopping. She hated to spend his money, but after 3 weeks of hearing him constantly complaining about it, she finally gave in. He always had a way of making her say yes. She feared what would happen if she ever said no. When they were done shopping, they went back to her house. She had only gotten 4 outfits that she actually liked because the rest seemed sleazy, but she didn't want to make him mad, so she got them anyway. She didn't feel like changing into the new outfits, so she went down to the living room while he got himself a beer from the refrigerator. She was about to check her messages when all of a sudden, whack! She felt something knock her in the head. She turned around to see that his eyes were red and wild. He had a beer bottle in his hand and he was coming towards her fast. She tried to leave, but he smacked her down, causing her to fall to the floor. She got up terrified, ran to the bathroom, and texted the one guy she knew she could depend on.